palace was silent that night. Too silent. Officer James Whitmore stood at his post outside the Queen's private chamber, his hand resting on the ceremonial sword at his side. 23 years he had served the crown, 23 years of loyalty, without question. But tonight, something felt wrong. A shadow moved at the end of the corridor. James's eyes narrowed. It was past midnight. No one should be in this wing. The figure stepped into the dim light. It was Lady Margaret, one of Camilla's senior advisors. She carried a leather folder under her arm and moved quickly, glancing over her shoulder every few steps. When she saw James, she froze. "Officer Whitmore," she said, her voice tight. "You should not be here." James straightened. "This is my post, my lady. I am always here." Her face went pale. She clutched the folder tighter. "Then you've seen nothing. Do you understand?" "Nothing." Before he could respond, she turned and disappeared down the stairs. James's heart pounded. In all his years, he had never been told to ignore something. He had never been warned to look away. If you want to know what happens next, make sure you're subscribed. This story is about to get much deeper, and you won't want to miss a single moment. James couldn't sleep that night. He kept seeing Lady Margaret's face, the fear in her eyes, the way she held that folder like it contained something dangerous. By dawn, he had made a decision. He needed to know what was going on. The next morning, James arrived early for his shift. He waited until the corridor was empty, then slipped into the records room. It was a risk. If anyone caught him, his career would be over. But something told him this was bigger than his job. He found the registry of palace communications. Dozens of letters, memos, official documents. He scanned the dates. Then he saw it. A letter addressed to King Charles dated 3 weeks ago. The subject line made his blood run cold. Regarding the legitimacy of succession and the rightful claim to the throne. James pulled the letter from the file. His hands trembled as he read. The letter was from a historian. It referenced documents from the late Queen Elizabeth's private archives, documents that had been sealed. Documents that, according to this letter, proved something incredible. Catherine, Princess of Wales, was the rightful Queen of England, not Camilla, not by marriage or by ceremony. By blood, James felt the room spin. This couldn't be real. But the letter was official. Stamped, verified. It claimed that Catherine's lineage traced back to a forgotten royal line. But one that had been hidden for generations. A line that gave her a direct claim to the throne, stronger than any other living royal, and someone was trying to bury it. James looked up. Footsteps echoed in the hallway outside. He quickly folded the letter and slipped it into his jacket. His heart hammered in his chest. If this was true, then everything the public knew was a lie, and if someone was hiding it, they would do anything to keep it hidden. James left the records room and returned to his post, but nothing felt the same. He watched every face that passed. Every advisor, every official. Any one of them could be part of this. That evening, as the sun set over the palace, James made a choice. He couldn't stay silent. Catherine deserved to know the truth. The people deserved to know. But first he needed proof. Real proof. And he needed to stay alive long enough to find it. James didn't go home that night. He stayed in the palace barracks, staring at the ceiling. The letter was hidden inside his locker, wrapped in cloth. He had read it a dozen times. Each time the words felt heavier. Catherine was the true queen. By morning, he had a plan. He needed to speak to someone he could trust. Someone who had been in the palace longer than him. Someone who might know the truth. Her name was Eleanor Hartley. She had been the late Queen Elizabeth's personal secretary for 40 years. Now retired, she lived in a small cottage just outside London. If anyone knew about hidden documents and royal bloodlines, it was her. James waited until his shift ended, then took the train to the countryside. The cottage was quiet, surrounded by rose gardens. Eleanor answered the door with a warm smile. But when she saw the look on James's face, her smile faded. "You found something," she said quietly. James nodded. "I need to know if it's real." Inside, he showed her the letter. Eleanor sat down slowly, reading in silence. Her hands began to shake. When she finished, she looked up at him with tears in her eyes. "I hoped this day would never come," she whispered. James leaned forward. "So it's true?" Eleanor stood and walked to a cabinet in the corner. She pulled out an old wooden box covered in dust. Inside were yellowed papers, photographs, and a leather journal. She placed it on the table. "The late Queen knew," Eleanor said. "She discovered it years ago when Catherine married William. She had historians trace Catherine's family tree. What they found shocked everyone." James stared at the documents. Birth certificates, marriage records, bloodline charts that went back centuries. And there, clear as day, was the proof. Catherine's ancestry connected her to a royal line that predated the current monarchy. A line that had been erased from history after a political betrayal in the 1600s. "Why didn't the Queen make this public?" James asked. Eleanor's face darkened. "Because she was protecting Catherine. If this came out, Catherine's life would be in danger. There are people in the palace, powerful people, who would do anything to keep this buried. They've built their lives on the current order. If Catherine's claim became public, everything would change." James felt a chill. "Who?" Eleanor hesitated. "Lady Margaret, Lord Ashford, others close to Camilla. They know. And they've been working for years to make sure no one else finds out." James's jaw tightened. "So they're hiding the truth to protect Camilla." Eleanor nodded. "Camilla doesn't know. At least I don't think she does. But the people around her do. And they've already done terrible things to keep this secret." "What kind of things?" Eleanor's voice dropped to a whisper. 3 years ago, a journalist started asking questions. She was investigating Catherine's family history. 1 week later, she died in a car accident. The police called it a tragedy. But I've always wondered. James felt sick. They killed her? I don't know, but I know they're capable of it. James stood, pacing the small room. His mind raced. If he went public with this, they would come after him. But if he stayed silent, Catherine would never know the truth. The people would never know. Eleanor placed a hand on his arm. "James, you have to be careful. If they find out you have this, you won't be safe. No one will be." James looked down at the documents. "What would the Queen want me to do?" Eleanor smiled sadly. "She would want you to protect Catherine. That's all she ever wanted." James gathered the papers and placed them back in the box. He would take them with him. He would find a way to get them to Catherine. But he had to be smart. One wrong move, and everything would fall apart. As he left the cottage, the sky was dark. Storm clouds rolled in from the west. James clutched the box under his arm and walked to the train station. Behind him, a black car pulled out from the shadows. Someone was watching. James saw the car in his rearview mirror. It stayed 3 cars back, never getting closer, never falling behind. His hands gripped the steering wheel. He had left the train station and rented a car instead. A precaution. But it hadn't helped. They knew. He took a sharp turn down a side street. The black car followed. James's heart pounded. He couldn't lead them back to his flat. He couldn't go to the palace. He needed somewhere safe. He thought of Catherine. She was at Kensington Palace tonight, hosting a charity event. Public, crowded, safe. If he could get the documents to her there, she would be protected by witnesses. No one would dare make a move in front of hundreds of people. James pressed the gas pedal and sped towards central London. The black car kept pace. Whoever was driving knew exactly where he was going. By the time James reached Kensington, the event was in full swing. Guests in elegant gowns and tailored suits filled the grand hall. Cameras flashed. Reporters mingled near the entrance. James parked down the street and grabbed the wooden box. He walked quickly toward the side entrance, the one used by staff. A hand grabbed his shoulder. James spun around. It was Michael Ashford, one of the palace security chiefs. His face was hard, his eyes cold. "Officer Whitmore," Michael said quietly. "You're not on duty tonight." James pulled his arm free. "I have business here." Michael stepped closer. "What kind of business?" James didn't answer. He pushed past Michael and walked toward the door. But two more guards appeared, blocking his path. They weren't palace guards. They were private security. The kind hired by people who wanted things done quietly. "Give me the box," Michael said. James held it tighter. "I don't know what you're talking about." Michael's voice turned sharp. "Don't play games. We know what you took from Eleanor Hartley. We know what's inside. And we know what you're planning to do." James's blood ran cold. They had been watching him the entire time, probably since the moment he left the records room. "You can't hide this forever," James said. "The truth will come out." Michael smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "The truth is whatever we say it is. Now give me the box, or this ends badly for you." James looked around. The street was empty. No witnesses. No cameras. If he handed over the box, Catherine would never know. The secret would stay buried. But if he refused, they would take it by force. And maybe worse, he made his decision. James turned and ran. The guards shouted behind him. Footsteps pounded the pavement. James ducked into an alley, his breath coming in gasps. The box felt heavy in his arms. He couldn't let them catch him. Not now. He burst out onto a busy street, weaving through pedestrians. Horns blared. People shouted. James didn't stop. He saw the entrance to the palace ahead. Just 50 meters. If he could get inside, if he could reach Catherine, it would all be over. A hand grabbed the back of his jacket and yanked him backward. James stumbled, nearly dropping the box. Michael stood over him, breathing hard. "Enough," Michael hissed. "You're done." James swung the box up, catching Michael in the jaw. The man staggered back. James scrambled to his feet and ran again. This time he didn't look back. He reached the palace entrance and shoved past the doorman. Inside, the sound of music and laughter filled the air. James pushed through the crowd, his uniform drawing confused stares. He saw Catherine across the room, speaking with a group of dignitaries. She looked radiant, smiling, unaware of the storm about to break. James moved toward her. But before he could reach her, someone stepped in his path. Lady Margaret. Her face was calm, but her eyes burned with fury. "You've made a terrible mistake," she said softly. James met her gaze. "The only mistake was thinking you could hide this." He stepped around her and walked straight to Catherine. The room seemed to slow. Every eye turned toward him. The music stopped. Catherine looked up, surprised. "Officer Whitmore," she said. "Is everything all right?" James knelt and placed the wooden box at her feet. His voice was steady, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Your Majesty," he said, "there's something you need to know." The ballroom went completely silent. Hundreds of eyes stared at James, kneeling before Catherine with the old wooden box. Cameras turned toward them. Reporters leaned in, sensing something big. Catherine looked down at the box, then at James. Her expression was confused, but composed. "What is this?" she asked quietly. James opened the box. Inside were the documents, the photographs, the proof. He pulled out the letter and handed it to her. "This belonged to the late Queen Elizabeth," James said. "It concerns your family, your bloodline, and your rightful place on the throne." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Catherine took the letter with trembling hands. She read slowly, her face growing pale. Her eyes moved over the words again and again, as if she couldn't believe what she was seeing. Behind her, William stepped forward. He read over her shoulder, his jaw tightening. When he looked up at James, there was shock in his eyes, but also understanding. "Is this real?" William asked. James nodded. Eleanor Hartley confirmed it. The late Queen knew. She kept it secret to protect Catherine, but others in the palace have been hiding it for their own reasons. Across the room, Lady Margaret moved toward the exit. James pointed at her. "Stop her," he said. Two palace guards moved to block the doors. Lady Margaret froze, her face twisting with rage. She turned to face the crowd. "This is nonsense," she said loudly. "A desperate attempt by a disgraced officer to create chaos. That letter is a forgery." James stood. Then, explain why you've been hiding the Queen's archives. Explain why a journalist died 3 years ago after asking questions about Catherine's ancestry. Explain why you tried to stop me tonight. The room erupted. Voices overlapped. Reporters shouted questions. Cameras flashed. Lady Margaret's face went white. Catherine stood, holding the letter. Her voice cut through the noise like a blade. Enough. Everyone stopped. Catherine looked at Lady Margaret, then at James, then at the crowd. When she spoke again, her voice was calm but firm. If what Officer Whitmore says is true, then the people of this country deserve to know. If there are documents proving my claim to the throne, they must be examined. Publicly, by independent historians. Lady Margaret stepped forward. Your Royal Highness, this is a mistake. These documents could destabilize the entire monarchy. Catherine's eyes hardened. The only thing that destabilizes the monarchy is lies. And I will not allow anyone, not even those closest to the crown, to hide the truth from the people. William placed a hand on her shoulder. We'll handle this together. James felt a surge of relief. Catherine was stronger than he'd imagined. She wasn't afraid of the truth. She was ready to face it, but Lady Margaret wasn't finished. She pulled out her phone and made a call. Within minutes, Lord Ashford arrived with a team of lawyers and advisors. They surrounded Catherine, speaking in urgent whispers. James could see the pressure building. They were trying to convince her to bury the documents. To keep everything quiet, Catherine listened, but her expression never changed. When they finished, she shook her head. I know, she said. I will not hide this. The documents will be released to the public tomorrow morning. Lord Ashford's face turned red. You don't understand what you're doing. If Camilla finds out about this, it will tear the family apart. Catherine met his eyes. Camilla deserves to know the truth as much as anyone. And if it tears us apart, then we were never as strong as we claimed to be. James watched as the advisors exchanged glances. They were losing control. For years, they had managed every scandal, every secret. But Catherine was different. She couldn't be controlled. That night, James was escorted to a secure room in the palace. They told him it was for his protection, but he knew it was also to keep him from talking to the press. He didn't mind. He had done what he needed to do. The rest was up to Catherine. Hours later, William came to see him. He sat down across from James, his face tired but grateful. You risked everything, William said. Why? James thought for a moment. Because the crown is bigger than any one person. It's about truth, about honor. If we lose that, we lose everything. William nodded slowly. The Queen would have been proud of you. James felt a lump in his throat. I hope so. William stood to leave, then paused at the door. Tomorrow, everything changes. Are you ready? James looked out the window at the dark sky. Somewhere out there, people were already talking. The story was spreading. By morning, the entire world would know. I'm ready, James said. But deep down, he knew the hardest part was still to come. Morning came too quickly. James woke to the sound of shouting outside the palace. He looked out the window and saw hundreds of people gathered at the gates. Protesters, supporters, journalists. The news had spread. Faster than anyone expected, Catherine's face was on every screen. Headlines screamed across newspapers and phones. Secret bloodline revealed. Catherine, the true queen. Palace in crisis. James dressed quickly and left the secure room. The palace halls were chaos. Staff rushed back and forth. Advisors huddled in corners, whispering urgently. No one seemed to know what to do. He found Catherine in the Queen's drawing room, sitting alone. She looked out the window at the crowd below, her expression unreadable. When she heard James enter, she turned and offered a small smile. They're calling for me to take the throne, she said quietly. But I never asked for this. James approached carefully. What will you do? Catherine looked down at her hands. I spoke to Charles this morning. He was shocked, hurt. He asked me if I intended to challenge Camilla, and Catherine shook her head. I told him I don't want the throne. I never have. But I also told him I won't lie about who I am. The people deserve the truth, even if it's complicated. James felt a wave of respect for her. She could have used this to seize power. Instead, she was choosing honesty. What did he say? James asked. Catherine smiled sadly. He said the Queen always knew I was special. That's why she loved me so much. He also said, her voice broke. He said he's sorry. For everything, before James could respond, the door burst open. Lady Margaret stormed in, followed by Lord Ashford. Their faces were furious. You've destroyed everything, Lady Margaret spat at Catherine. Do you have any idea what you've done? The monarchy is collapsing because of your selfishness. Catherine stood, her voice icy. The monarchy is collapsing because people like you lied. You tried to bury the truth, and now it's come out in the worst possible way. Lord Ashford stepped forward. We were protecting you. Protecting the crown. If you had just kept quiet, if I had kept quiet, I would have been complicit in the lie, Catherine interrupted. And I will never do that. Lady Margaret's eyes burned. You think you're noble? You think you're a hero? You're a fool. Camilla will never forgive you for this. The family will never forgive you. Catherine lifted her chin. Then I'll live with that. But I won't live with being a liar. Lady Margaret turned and stormed out. Lord Ashford followed, slamming the door behind him. The room fell silent. James watched Catherine, waiting. She stood at the window again, staring at the crowd. Finally, she spoke. I'm going to address them. James's eyes widened. Are you sure? Catherine nodded. They deserve to hear it from me. Not from the press. Not from advisors. From me, an hour later, the palace courtyard was packed. Cameras from every major news network pointed at the podium where Catherine stood. The crowd hushed as she began to speak. I stand before you today with a truth I only recently learned myself, Catherine said, her voice steady. Documents have surfaced proving that my bloodline carries a claim to the British throne. A claim that, by law, is stronger than the current succession. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Catherine raised a hand for silence. But I want to be clear. I do not seek the throne. I never have. I am honored to serve this country as the Princess of Wales, and that is enough for me. However, I also believe in transparency. I believe the people of this nation have a right to know the truth about their history, their monarchy, and their leaders. She paused, looking directly into the cameras. For too long, secrets have been kept in the name of protection. But secrets breed distrust. They create division, and they weaken the very institutions they're meant to protect. Today, I choose truth over secrecy. One choose honesty over convenience, and I ask all of you to do the same. The crowd erupted in applause. Some cheered, others cried. James watched from the side, his chest tight with emotion. She had done it. She had taken control of the narrative and turned it into something powerful. But not everyone was happy. Inside the palace, as Camilla watched the speech on television, her face was pale, her hands shaking. She turned to Charles, who sat beside her. She's taken everything from me, Camilla whispered. Charles reached for her hand. No, she's given us a chance to rebuild. To be honest, that's more than we've had in years. Camilla pulled her hand away. You don't understand. They'll never accept me now. They'll always see me as the imposter. Charles looked at her sadly. Then we proved them wrong. Together. But Camilla didn't answer. She stood and left the room, leaving Charles alone with the weight of everything that had changed. 3 weeks passed. The world had changed, but not in the way anyone expected. Catherine did not claim the throne. Parliament reviewed the documents and confirmed their authenticity. But Catherine publicly declined any challenge to the succession. She remained the Princess of Wales, serving the crown with the same grace she always had. Camilla, however, stepped back from many of her public duties. The revelation had shaken her deeply. Though she remained queen consort, her presence at official events became rare. Some said she was ashamed. Others said she was heartbroken. But those closest to her knew the truth. She was tired. Tired of fighting. Tired of secrets. James Whitmore became a symbol. Some called him a hero. Others called him a traitor who had broken his oath of loyalty. He was removed from active palace duty, but not dismissed. Instead, he was reassigned to a quieter post in the royal archives. It was a demotion, but James didn't mind. He had done what he believed was right. One afternoon, Catherine came to visit him in the archives. She walked through the quiet halls, running her fingers along the old shelves filled with history. When she found James, she smiled. "I wanted to thank you," she said. "I know what you risked for this." James stood and bowed slightly. "I only did what the Queen would have wanted." Catherine's eyes glistened. "She would have been proud of you, and so am I." They stood in silence for a moment, surrounded by centuries of royal history. Finally, Catherine spoke again. "Do you regret it?" she asked. "Bringing this to light?" James thought carefully. "No, but I understand why some do. The truth isn't always easy. Sometimes it hurts. Sometimes it changes everything. But I believe people deserve it, even when it's painful." Catherine nodded. "I used to think my role was to keep the peace, to smile and wave and never cause trouble. But I've learned something these past few weeks. Peace built on lies isn't real peace. It's just silence. And silence can be just as damaging as chaos." James smiled. "You're wiser than most people twice your age." Catherine laughed softly. "I don't feel wise. I feel exhausted. That's how you know you're doing something important," James said. Catherine reached into her bag and pulled out a small box. She handed it to James. Inside was a medal, engraved with the royal seal. "This is for you," she said, "for service to the crown, for courage, and for truth." James stared at the medal, his throat tight. "I don't deserve this." "Yes, you do," Catherine said firmly. "More than anyone I know." As she turned to leave, James called out to her, "Your Majesty?" Catherine paused and looked back. "What will you tell your children about all this?" James asked. Catherine smiled. "I'll tell them the truth, that their mother comes from a long line of strong, complicated, imperfect people, and that the best thing we can do is honor them by living honestly, even when it's hard." James nodded. "They're lucky to have you." Catherine's smile widened. "I hope so." After she left, James sat alone in the archives, holding the medal. Outside, the world continued to debate and discuss and dissect everything that had happened. But here, in the quiet, James felt at peace. He had protected the crown, not by hiding the truth, but by revealing it. And in doing so, he had given Catherine something no one else could: the freedom to be herself, fully, honestly, without shame. Months later, a new portrait was unveiled in the palace. It showed Catherine standing tall, dressed in royal blue, with a quiet strength in her eyes. Beneath the portrait was a plaque. It read, "Catherine, Princess of Wales, daughter of the people, guardian of truth." Camilla attended the unveiling, standing beside Charles. She looked at the portrait for a long time, her face unreadable. Then, quietly, she whispered to Charles, "She deserves it." Charles squeezed her hand. "Yes, she does." And in that moment, something shifted. The tension that had hung over the palace for weeks began to ease. Not because the truth had been hidden again, but because it had been accepted. James watched from the back of the room. He saw Catherine with her family, smiling and at peace. He saw Camilla, still standing, still present, even in her pain. He saw Charles, trying to hold everything together with dignity. And he realized something. The crown wasn't about who wore it. It was about the people who believed in it. The people who fought for it. The people who told the truth, even when it cost them everything. As the ceremony ended and the guests filed out, James slipped away quietly. He returned to the archives, to the documents and letters and stories that had been his life for so many years. And there, in the silence, he smiled, because he had protected the crown, not with secrets, not with silence, but with the truth. And the truth, he knew, would always be stronger than any lie.